Okay, great. Okay, so just a quick recap before we start. I think most of us has joined in, as far as I can see, but still, in case somebody is not joined in yet, just a quick recap of what we did yesterday. Okay, so anybody who like to cover, who like to tell me, did you did you go through any annual report? Try finding the items which we had covered yesterday. Anybody? I think that you guys can unmute yourself directly and speak up.
Hello.
Hello.
Uh, yeah, actually, I was going through a report, but there is bifurcation of investments also in current and non-current. So, what is the
Yes,
basis of that? Like,
obviously. Um, so current, but you won't find any investment in associate or investment in subsidiary as a current investment. Did you find it anywhere?
no, it was in non-current, but
It was
current
always in non.
investment.
So you can have some other investments, right? You can have. It's not necessary that investment is always going to be in shares or ventures or stake of some
Mhm.
company. Non-current investment, such as investment in associate subsidiaries, are of non-current nature. Why? Because that is a long-term association. You will never invest in a company wherein you are not looking forward for. You will not make a company. You will not do any substantial investment in any company if you're not looking for a long-term plan for yourself. Whereas other short-term investments you can have in any of the companies, some little bit of amounts. This is why um, never you will see huge investments in which have long-term associations in current investments. So
Okay.
basically, the idea is that a company can have short-term investments and long-term
Mhm.
investments. Any investments based on the management decision, and but you will never see any investment in associate or investment in subsidiary as a current investment. It will always be a non-current investment because obviously if you've invested so much money into one company, you want to be associated with it for a very long period of time,
Okay.
not for merely
Okay.
12 months or so.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So which company did you see, Manisha?
It was a Reliance audit report for this 1920.
Okay, great. Anything else which you could locate in it, which we covered yesterday?
There were PPE, property, and it was a very huge report. It was more than 400 pages, so couldn't go through the entire. But yeah, bit of it I saw, and it was clear. matlab, Bit of the some items were there. Like I jumped to the balance sheet directly. The other pages I skipped those. So, but it was okay. Matlab, there was no such terms which were not understandable or something.
Okay, that is good. It is good that you saw it for yourself and you tried
Hmm.
experiencing it out. That is
Hmm.
commendable. Anybody else who had a chance to visit? Although I know the class ended up quite late, so you might have not got ample time to look into it, but still a quick glimpse. Anybody else? Or should we begin ahead? Somebody has unmuted themselves, but we can't hear you. Okay, I believe that nobody got the opportunity except Manisha to visit in. So we'll just quickly pick up from where we left yesterday, and then we can have a quick revision of the entire portion, or we can quickly revise before starting in. How would you like to go ahead? Quickly in the chat box. You want to revise the previous stuff first, like 5-10 minutes, and then go ahead, or should I pick up further? I see no responses in the chat box. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Manisha says yes. Am I audible only to Manisha? Okay, so I'll recheck quite a number of times because I am hosting a meeting for the first time on this application. So not really sure. Let's continue further. So we had covered a couple of items up till tangible assets, and we were basically on tangible assets when we had a quick winding up. One additional concept, so we'd covered all the basics around tangible assets or fixed assets or property, plant, and equipment. And I'd shown you a note also wherein the detailed calculation of the gross value and then the depreciation amounts and then the net value or the carrying value calculations were there. So two more components, that is depreciation and net value, in addition to the gross value, you will always see. Gross value is simply the cost price of that particular fixed asset, whichever the company has purchased. Year on year, you have to charge depreciation on it. And why depreciation is charged? Because the machine which you are using, or maybe any other asset, maybe it is a vehicle, maybe it is some sort of a computer, that is going to wear and tear down year on year basis. So a defined percentage of expense is charged out of that particular asset every year and known as depreciation. So there can be various methods of calculation of depreciation. I am sure people who are from the accounts background or who've studied accounts maybe in their 12th standard or in the 11th standard or college must know the different methods of depreciation. Anybody can name any methods they know about how to calculate depreciation?
Straight line method.
Okay, one method is straight line method. Anybody else? Any other method?
Written down value.
Written down value, very correct. Any other method you can think of? Okay, Anirudh says double reclining method. Anybody else? Any other methods you might have heard of anywhere? Guys, it is early in the morning and I feel that everybody is very low on energy today. Diminishing formula method. Okay, so basically what the idea is that there are a lot of methods of calculation for depreciation and wherein a company can opt for any of the methods available, but just for consistency purposes. So you must have you must have understood in the first session that we have to follow the principle of consistency, and we have to make it consistent not only with our own financial statements but also with the industry wide practice. So since there are so many methods available across various gaps, across various countries, everybody has reached on an industry practice consensus that we are going to follow a written down value method of debt calculation for depreciation. This particular method you will be able to find in the PPE standard as well. If anybody of you wants to go through it, you can see it on the MCA website. You will see a list of Indian GAAP standards. You will see Ind AS also. You will see IFRS also. Depending upon the country, each of these accounting standards are applied, and you can see that in the plant property equipment standard, there is a dedicated paragraph wherein they have clearly mentioned ideally they want us to use WDV method only. In case you decide or the company decides, okay, this is not a feasible they can opt out showcase it in their financial statements that this is the amount of depreciation ideally WDV was presenting, and additionally to this, since we are changing the method, so these are the repercussions and this is the amount of calculation we are doing in. So the two most commonly used methods are straight line method and the reducing balance method or the WDV method. So what happens in the straight line method is that we take a started percentage every year, and based on the cost price of the asset which has been purchased, and we depreciate the same amount of depreciation every year. So like here, just go through this example and you can see that we have so just quickly taking you through the example is, suppose we've taken a machinery of 30,000 rupees and we say that okay, first case, a simple case wherein there is no residual value, then and the life is 5 years. So what how we will calculate depreciation is very simple. We'll simply divide 30,000 divided by 5, and every year you have to charge 6,000 rupees as depreciation in that case. But this is not a method which you will find across financial statements which I had asked you to look upon. You will generally find the written down value method only. This method has been allowed to some specific industries, sometimes in some assets of the power sector or the electricity sector, they are allowed to use this. Again, they have to give a disclosure wherein they have to state that we are opting for straight line method of depreciation. Also, there is an added on thing which is sometimes you already know on the first day that okay, at the end of 5 years I will be receiving 2,000 rupees as a scrap value when I'll go to sell this remaining machine, whatever the bits and pieces are left. So while calculation of depreciation, in the formula we deducted beforehand in the cost of asset and then divided by the expected life in order to reach the depreciation that is to be charged every year. So the second part wherein we have deducted 2,000 out of 30,000 and divided it by 5, that is the calculation you will generally see if somebody is opting for this straight line method of depreciation. Yet another method which is WDV. Anybody would like to explain me WDV, because I'm sure that people know what is WDV. So Piyush and Ishan, I don't know. Piyush, I think, told us about the WDV method. Piyush, would you like to elaborate on it?
There is not fixed rate of depreciation. It can be 10%, it can be 12%, or it can be 8%. Changes
written down value.
Piyush, we are not able to hear you nicely. Can you please repeat?
It can be different a different rate of depreciation that it's not fixed. It can be changed variable. It can be 10% or it can be 12% or it can be 8%. Changes year by year.
Hmm. Not exactly right, Piyush. Anybody else who would like to explain what is WTV?
Yes, Siddharth here.
Yes, Siddharth.
So written down value is depreciation calculated on balance asset value. So
Right.
suppose 10,000 minus 10%. So next time we'll calculate on 90,000.
Exactly. So what happens? So as the name suggests, Piyush, it is written down value method. So what happens in straight line method is every time you are calculating. So basically, there is not much of a difference. The percentage of depreciation remains same in all the years. Firstly, let me clarify this. Just to develop the concept. So it is not, it is extra to the slides maybe, but I'll explain it to you. So how in industry it happens is suppose you've purchased any asset and you've decided on the first year that I am going to charge 10% depreciation. You are supposed to charge 10% in not only in first year but all the years which are going to come till that asset is going to stay in your books of accounts. Now where the method varies is if you're following straight line method of depreciation, you will calculate that 10% always on the cost price. So suppose you purchase the machinery of rupees 100 in the first year and rupees 1 lakh in the first year, and you decided that I will charge 10% depreciation. So it will always come out to be the same amount, and every year you will charge the same 10% on 1 lakh rupees only. Whereas in case of WTV method, every year the base value keeps on changing. Why? Because in the first year you are charging depreciation on 1 lakh rupees because it was the cost price. Then you will reduce the amount of depreciation and charge it on the balance amount. This is only where the two methods differ from each other. Otherwise, the percentage never changes. In case some company, maybe at the end of the third year or fourth year, they believe that okay, 10% is not a correct amount of depreciation. Ideally, our machine is getting depreciated a lot faster and the depreciation percentage should be 15%. Then what they will do is they can start with 15%, but they will have to do it retrospectively, or additionally they will have to disclose it in their financial statements that they have diverted from their already existing policy of 10% and come down to 15%, and they have to also state the reasons of why they have changed the percentage. Again, why all this exercise is done to, because we have to be consistent while we are making financial statements. That is one of the principles, key principles that has to be followed. If you are breaking consistency, that is not allowed. So you will have to do it retrospectively from the back date or from the date wherein the asset was purchased only. I hope this concept is clear to everybody. You understand what is WDV method and what is the straight line method. Okay, so I see responses in the chat box as yes. So this is a quick graph to just show that how things happen. In the WDV method, what happens is your asset gradually gets, so the amount of depreciation also falls in the first year. The asset is at its highest value. It was 1 lakh rupees. So the depreciation amount would be the highest in the first year, and as and when time passes by, depreciation amount will also start reducing. Why? Because the base value of the asset is also reducing. So every year you are deducting that much amount of money and then charging on the remaining balance. So you will see that year on year the amounts are different and the amounts keep on falling. Whereas in case of straight line depreciation method, you will see that the curve is a constant. Why? Because in the first year itself, the amount of depreciation was calculated for all the years, and the same amount is being charged in the books of accounts. So this is why you can see there is a total difference in the graph. Now, I would like to put in a quick question for all of you. Why do you think that these standards have prescribed us to follow WDV method or the reducing balance method instead of following straight line method? Any wild guesses as to why they might have thought of using this particular method? Anybody from the audience? In case you're hesitant to speak up, you can also use the chat box.
Hello. Hi. So
Hello.
I think in WDV method, the initial amounts are higher. So there are
Right.
usually assets have more uses or more wear and tear in the initial years rather than the end years. So that's the reason usually WDV is used.
Yes, very correct. So, just to take a personal example, in case you've purchased a new phone or any new gadget, you try to use the most of it as soon as it comes to you. That is the human tendency, and since humans are running the companies, that is the company's tendency also. Whenever any plant and machinery is very, very new, we try to take out the most of it. So in the first year or in the initial time periods, it is all depreciation would be higher because we are using the asset to the best of its capacity. As and when the time goes forward, the the utility of that asset gradually reduces. Suppose you have been using a phone for like you can see that if you purchase a phone and you try to use it in the as soon as you get it most of it, and gradually the technology gets obsolete, and maybe after 3 years that phone is absolutely of no use to you. So always there is a peak amount wherein there's a peak period in the beginning when you use any particular asset. Gradually the asset also comes to a neutral point wherein the wear and tear and the loss is not that much. So this is why it was thought that WDV is should be made one of the ideal methods of charging in depreciation for any asset. But still, again, straight line is also followed across industry. There are some specific industries which opt for this particular method. A quick homework for all of you. I would like you to find out that which are the industries which have been allowed or given an option that okay, you can go in for straight line method, and this homework is just for India perspective. These rules are different across the world. Across the world, WDV is the prescribed method. I am not very sure whether they have specifically given options to any particular industries about choosing any other method. But here in India, some industries are, yes, they are permitted to allow straight line. So, okay, this was about depreciation. So, this is just a comparative example. Again, how to see how the amounts of depreciation varies. So, this will give you, I think, complete clarity about the different methods. Like the 1 lakh example that I told you, herein we have a truck which is bought for 18,000 rupees, and the truck's depreciation rate is always 20%, you can see, and the life is 4 years. So how the two methods will vary in calculations, you will be able to see over here. If we were to follow straight line method, what we'll do is straight away 18,000, the life is of 4 years. So I think there is some disconnect. Okay. So life of the truck is basically for 5 years, not 4 years. They want to know the depreciation for at the end of the 4th year. So what happens is straight away 18,000 divided by 5, you get an amount of 3,600. This is the amount you are supposed to charge every year. So at the end of 4 years, the total value of depreciation from 1st year to 4th year would be 3,600 into 4, and the net remaining value of the asset would be just subtract the entire depreciation or the accumulated depreciation from this, and at the end of the 4th year, the remaining life of or the remaining net value of the asset would be 3,600 rupees only. Whereas in case of reducing, you simply pick on the percentage, and in the first year you will charge 20% of 18,000, which comes out to be 3,600, the same as this number, as you can see over here. Now what happens in the second year is you will charge depreciation on 14,400 of rupees 2880. So every year you will see that we reduce the amount of depreciation from the existing opening balance. We come out to a closing balance or the net value, and that becomes the opening value for the next year. So I hope that depreciation is clear to all of you. And just to summarize the topic, we had firstly done intangible assets, wherein we used to charge amortization. Again, the calculation is same for amortization also. We can have two methods, and both the methods go simultaneously only. If I was to calculate amortization according to straight line method, the same method will be provided. And if it was done on the WTV method, the same way it would be calculated. But at a time, you can have only one method for intangibles or tangibles. Usually, you will see depreciation is always charged on tangible assets. So after covering tangible, we covered in depreciation. Now we come to the next topic, which is investments. So till here, if anybody has any doubts in tangible assets, intangibles, or depreciation, you can quickly ask him.
Ma'am, a question.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Say example, the truck example I'm taking, but with a longer duration and a higher amount. Say the truck was bought for 10 lakh and its expected years is 10. You'd reduce the depreciation to 0 at the end of 10 years, and you sell it at 14 years for 1 lakh. So that 1 lakh goes into deferred assets in the balance sheet.
No, so the 1 lakh amount is not an asset for you. Basically, what happens is anything becomes an asset not only by the nature of that particular thing, but according to the definition of plant and property and equipment, which is mentioned in the accounting standard. So what accounting standard tells us is that anything which is of utility to the company and company is going to derive an economic benefit out of that particular physical thing is known as an asset. So at the end of 14th year, when you are selling the machinery, that amount is not going to bring any economic benefit to you for future years. It is just a scrap value for you, so it will not be added as plant, property and equipment. It would be simply scrap for you. So it will be coming under other incomes, and in other incomes it will come as income from sale of scrap, which is not going to be an asset for the company. It is going to be one income for the company. Are you clear on this?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much.
So every time we have to make an asset, just a quick clarification to all of you. We are doing a very basic class, but obviously since there are detailed standards on all of these items, so these items are very clearly defined in those standards. There are a lot of terms and conditions as to what particular physical substance would be asset for one company and would not be asset, or would be a liability, or would be an investment for another company. We always look upon the individual standards while preparing financial statements, and whatever is satisfied by the definition, only those things are accounted for as assets or inventory to the company. Okay, so coming down further, we have our next topic known as investments. We've covered some basic part of investment yesterday also, wherein I'd asked you to see what are investments in subsidiaries, joint ventures, and associates. Did anybody of you try to find out the difference between subsidiary, joint venture, and associate? Tried looking up yourselves? Anybody? Yes, no, something, please write on the chat box. You did not have the time. Okay, so I see no responses in the chat box. I think that you guys did not get the time. So, just to give you a quick recap, any company can invest into any asset or any resource, any shares of any other company. All those investments which are not being used for our own business, but we have done for the purpose of investment. But yes, we are definitely expecting future benefit out of it. Those monetary assets purchased by the company are known as investments. And you can see investments are of two types in any financial statements. In the beginning of the session, I think Manisha asked me that there were two subheads, one current and one non-current investments. So again, explaining it, non-current investments would be investments that the company intends to hold for a period of more than 12 months, and the period can be an unlimited period can be 10 years, period can be anything, but anything more than 12 months. When a company decides that, okay, I want to invest maybe in a very short term scheme, or just for 3 months or less than 12 months, it is known as current investments. So you will always find two bifurcations, but generally you won't find any company investing in any subsidiary or any joint venture or any associate for a short term. So you won't find it in current assets, you will always find it in the non-current section. Sometimes you can find that there is investment in joint venture in current investment section. Short term be a project which can be incurred with collaboration with some other party. So that can be appearing in short-term investments, but generally there are no items out of the three items in short-term or current investments. How it is calculated in the financial statement is very, very simple. It is carried at cost usually, But what happens in case of long-term investment is you have to mark it to the market, but on the lower side. So what happens is anything which is lower out of the cost or the fair market value that is charged. So just to highlight, I'm saying this happens only in case of long-term investment. So suppose you have invested into a company's shares, and you plan to hold that investment for 5 years, but suddenly some news comes up and the company goes into insolvency, maybe at the end of the second year. So now you are not able to sell that particular investment. You still want to hold it, but again, the market reputation of the company in which you've invested is very, very low, and the share valuation has declined substantially. So, what the company needs to do is they need to present it at the lower value out of the two things. First being the cost on which they had originally purchased that particular share. Second, the market valuations that has been done. So this case will never apply if valuation goes up. If valuation goes up, again, if you will take lower out of the valuation and the cost will always be the lower one. So you will value it as costs simply, which is the age-old practice. So just a general rule, investments are usually valued at cost. In some cases, in case of long-term investment, in some special circumstances, they can be also valued at fair value. The rule being that it has to be, the fair value has to be less than the cost price of that particular investment. Are you guys okay with this? Clearly understood what are long-term investments and the short-term investments? Okay, so I see responses
Hello.
from everybody. Yes.
Hi. So I would like to know if a JV is for maybe a 2-year term period. So will that be categorized as non-current or current?
In the first year of financial statements,
Yeah.
you tell me the answer of this particular question. What do you think it should be classified as?
In current, because it's for a shorter period of time.
What is the shorter period of time?
It may be 2 years.
So I told you that anything which is above 12 months goes into long term, and anything which is below 12 months goes into short term.
So for first year it would be non-current and the next year it would be current.
Right. Did all of you understand this? So in the first year, when you are planning that the JV is going to be there for around 2 years, it will be classified as non-current investment, which would be a long-term investment. Then when you're preparing financial statements for the second year, you will again evaluate the all your investments, which investments you are going to hold in for another 12 months period and which you are not going to hold for another 12 months. So now at the end of the first year, when you are on the second year, you realize that okay, this particular JV is going to last only for one more month, or maybe 2 months or so. Then you will classify it as current instead of non-current, which was the previous year classification. So every time you're making your financial statement, you're doing this analysis, which investments you are going to hold in for which period, which amount of period. If the period is more than 12 months, you will simply classify it as non-current. If you are not planning to hold it for so long, then it will come under as current investments. So this is clear. So now one additional point is, sometimes you will see, I'm not sure people who are already trading in this group or something. Every time you are going to purchase some sort of investment, there might be some incidental charges, some legal fees, some sort of commissioning, some extra added charges associated with that particular investment, or maybe some sort of taxes, any of those charges which are directly related to that particular investment also is a cost for that particular investment. So while we are booking in the investment in the first year, we'll add all those incidental charges along with the value of investment. Suppose the investment is for 1 lakh rupees, but in order to purchase that investment, you have to pay another 1000 rupees as tax and maybe 500 rupees as commission to the mediator who's got you that investment. Then the 1000 rupees will also be added to the 1 lakh rupees of investment, and the 500 rupees will also be added to the cost of investment. Okay. So this was up till here when you have recently purchased the investment. In case after 2 years you decide that okay, these shares have matured for me and I want to go ahead and sell them out, how that recording is going to be done in financial statement is whatever expenses you've incurred and whatever is the carrying amount, that is going to be reduced from whatever you are receiving from from that particular investment, and the differential of all these figures will come out to be profit from sale of investment. You will generally see profit on sale of investment as the word used. Sometimes you can also see profit on disposal of investment. So sale of investment, disposal of investment are alternative terms you will generally see in any of the financial statements. So this herein you the simple formula, which is the carrying amount, whatever is coming into your books of accounts, and whatever proceeds you've received and expenses you've incurred in selling that particular investment, you will just reduce it and you will come out on the profit on disposal. This particular figure you will be able to identify in the cash flow statement also, and also in the profit and loss account. Again, just like when there is a scrap sale of asset, it comes under other incomes. You will be able to see profit from this particular sale in other incomes. And in case if there is a loss, you will be able to see that in expense side. I hope that investments is clear to you. The accounting treatment for investments is very, very clear to everybody. Just a quick yes, no, thumbs up, any doubts related to investment you can quickly bring in. Also, yesterday I missed on to your break. In case you guys get tired and you want a quick break, maybe a water break, maybe a quick break, you can ask me on the chat box. We can have a break of 5-10 minutes in between. Although the session is only for 2 hours, I will not recommend a break. But in case you guys want fun, we can surely have it. Okay. Now coming on to another item, which is inventory. Again, inventory. Anybody who would like to explain me first what is inventory according to them, or any alternative terms you can use for inventory?
Stock of goods.
Quickly. Yes, please.
And stock of goods.
Stock of goods is one alternative name, right? Okay. Anybody who knows various types of inventory or any types of inventories or stock?
Raw material before production is inventory, and it is
Okay.
always current asset.
It is always current asset, very rightly said. Raw material is one type of inventory. Any other type of inventory? Anybody else?
Goods under process and finished goods.
Very correct. So two other types of inventories: goods under process or work in progress, which we also say, and then there is finished goods. So basically now this is broadly the summary. This is broadly around inventory. So we've covered the various types of inventories, and that I've gotten from you only. So there are three types of inventories. One being raw material, second being work in progress or anything that is into production right now, and the third one being the finished goods. So these are the three basic classification of inventory. Alternative terms for inventory could be stock. So just as inventory, there are various methods of valuation of inventory as well. Anybody who knows any methods already? Yes, I'm not presenting anything because then you will just see the screen and tell me things. So this is why I'm not currently presenting, Sneha. So anybody who knows any methods of valuation of inventory? Sneha, do you know any? Piyush says
It's
he knows about FIFO and LIFO. Any other method?
weighted average.
Weighted average is another method. So see, just like we did in assets, there were various methods of calculation of depreciation. Similar is the nature of inventory. There are ample methods of calculation for um, NRV is another method, very right. So there are many methods. If you try to Google methods of valuation of inventory, you might find 8 to 10 methods of valuation of inventory. But again, there is one prescribed particular method which is used in the financial statements. If you want to deviate from it, you can, but again, disclosure and the additional calculations as a matter of rule will come on to you. So what is inventories? Inventory has three components. We'll go through each of them in details right now. First one being the raw material. So a simple example of raw material would be, supposedly you are into manufacturing of pens. So your raw material would come out to be the ink, maybe the refill, maybe the body of the particular pen, and the plastic which is used in it, or whatever chemical is used to prepare that ink, that is going to be raw material. We are going to derive benefit out of it in the future coming time period, and definitely inventory, no company holds inventory with the aim that okay, I am not going to sell it for another period of 12 months. I am going to keep it with myself and I'll sell it at the end of the 5th year. You will find that no company has such a process. Whatever we are processing, we want to sell it ASAP. This is why inventory is usually classified into current assets only. Sometimes there can be a case wherein there is some old school inventory lying in our books of accounts, which we have not been able to sell for more than 12 months, or which is pending since years because technology has changed, but it is in good condition, or maybe the fashion has changed. So this happens usually in case of garment industry. The fashion changes and again the inventory becomes obsolete. So the company might not choose to write it off, but might choose to show it as a fixed asset, as a long-term asset. That okay, maybe the fashion is not there today, but after 2 years we are going to revive this fashion back, and then that inventory could be used. So these are like special circumstances which I'm talking about. Usually the aim of any company would be to finish off all the inventory that they make within a time span of 12 months. So this is why inventory is always valued as a current asset. And the first one, raw material, is very simple. Whatever you are purchasing, the inputs you are purchasing, and you have it in your books or your premises, and you want to develop your product out of them. all that goes into the raw material category. The second category would be work in progress, which is simply whenever any goods are into production, that is one level of it, they have not been converted into the entire product, but yes, they are somewhat ready, so they have to be classified as WIP. Sometimes you will find at the end of the year, a lot of companies might have very less finished goods remaining with them, but a lot of WIP appearing in their books of accounts. Why? Because all the finished goods get sold very fast, and things into production are still lying in as WIP. The third category is finished goods, which is the core product of the company, which the company is selling to its customers. Um, so these are the three broad bifurcations. Not always you will find in financial statements inventory figures. You in case of finished goods, because some companies can have a policy that they sell or they make according to the customer requirement. So in those cases, they don't manage, they don't keep much of an inventory, and you'll only see raw material or WIP in their books of accounts and no finished goods category. But I think if you search out a couple of annual reports, you will be able to clearly see all of them. Again, in the balance sheet, you will see a lump sum amount of inventory. Then when you go on to the notes to that account, you will be able to find this bifurcation given to you. So now coming down to the methods of valuation, the first method of this inventory, the first method is the FIFO method. So this is the method that has been prescribed to us. Most of the companies follow FIFO method only. The full form of FIFO is first in and first out. So what it means in simple language, as the name suggests, is whatever inventory you are preparing first, you need to sell it. Whatever inventory is coming on later, keep it for the next sales. So for example, I am into the manufacturing of a special apple sauce. So whatever inventory I've prepared in January, so I've prepared inventory in February, but I could not sell anything in January or February because March is when my customer wants that particular sauce. So what am I supposed to do is first sell out the January stock and then sell out the February stock, because obviously the February stock is fresher than the January stock. So I would want to get over with my previous stock first. So this is why first in and first out method was recommended, and most of the companies you will find are following this method. The second method is LIFO method. Anybody basis on the FIFO method would like to explain what it could be?
Last in, first out.
Okay, so in the same example, like January, February, and I was making sales in March, what I would do if I was following LIFO method?
We have to consume material that come in February or in March. We have to first then sell them first.
Exactly. So we'll satisfy the customer's requirement first with the February stock and then with the January stock. Why? Because we are following LIFO method. So anybody who can give me any example of why any industry would want to opt for LIFO method instead of FIFO method? Any industry example you can think of would like to choose this particular method over the FIFO method?
Mining,
Why so?
storage,
Okay. But again, they can sell the previous stock first and then on the remaining space they can. So basically, storage is not usually the reason of these valuation stuff. Storage can be a reason for, costing, for costing purposes, it can be a reason. But if you will not be able to store any particular inventory in one place, you will hire another go down. But still, you will want the previous stock to get emptied out first because it was mined in first. I mean, that is the usual nature in our homes as well. Suppose you've purchased some fruits and vegetables, you would always want that you finish in the previously purchased stock first. Why? Because it is perishable in nature. So not very apt, but okay, storage can be one reason. Okay, you are facing storage problem, so you want to outrightly sell it off. But anybody else, any other industry you can think of?
Oh, ma'am, I think you can also say the medical shops.
Yes, that is a good example.
Yeah, because
But
suppose if, sorry,
again,
sorry.
medicine shop. Suppose you were running a medical shop, you have medicines which are going to expire in. They are previously manufactured and they will expire in the coming 2 months. And whereas you have another stock which is going to expire in 5 months, you will always want to sell your customer the 2 months one before it gets expired, right?
Yeah,
So they also
okay.
follow FIFO.
Antique shop could be one example wherein people sell antiques. So they would like to sell the newer ones first so that they have a higher value of uh, the items which are antique.
That is uh, that is uh,
Hello.
that is still a decent example. Uh, they can be opting for the LIFO method that is applicable to them. So just to give you guys a quick example, maybe the fashion industry. So whatever fashion, somebody is given mobile phone companies, technology and fashion. Yeah, very right examples. Suppose you are into manufacturing of fashion goods, then whatever the latest fashion is as on the date, you would want to manufacture it and sell it ASAP. So usually you will see LIFO being opted in the fashion industry because the fashion keeps on changing and no customer would want anything from the previous fashion. So they are left with no option than to sell whatever is ongoing in trend. Suppose you go to buy a particular suit or maybe a particular design of sari, you always try to buy that is whatever is latest in fashion. So everything that they have manufactured currently, only those are the type of inventory they are able to sell. Anything which is from a previous fashion, it just keeps on remaining with them. So fashion industry is one, technology is another example. Um, Mobile phones, computers. So you won't you since the customer needs that particular item only which is latest, you are not able to sell the previously lying stock with you unless and until you decide to update it or upgrade it according to the current fashion. So that could be one industry which would want to apply LIFO instead of FIFO. Otherwise, mostly you will find people are very comfortable applying FIFO only, and that is their method of trading also. Automobile industry can be another good example. People want to buy the latest car, and ultimately you will see a lot of car manufacturers, what they do is whatever model, either they discontinue it when they are trying to launch a new model, or they again break it down and use the parts in some other cars. So this is the general practice of industry. LIFO is only applicable to special nature industry, I can say, who have technology requirements or fashion requirements or who work according to trends which are ongoing. Whereas FIFO is a very universal method. and is generally applied across industries. This is why it is a recommended method. But yes, if I'm into fashion industry and I feel that FIFO is not really working out for me, I can opt for LIFO. Again, what the requirement is that you would have to disclose it separately in your financial statements, and where you will disclose, I want to know from all of you, because I think I have told you yesterday and a couple of times. So suppose I am not going to follow FIFO and I want to apply LIFO, what all additional disclosures or additional wherein I have to update information? Tell me. Sections, anything, notes to accounts, very right. So in notes to accounts, in the basis of preparation section, you describe what basis you have followed in preparation of the financial statements. There you will mention that I am not following FIFO method, but I have opted for LIFO method. Why? Because my inventory or my company is dealing in such nature of goods, and that method is not very correct. It will not present a very fair view of my financial statements if I opt for it. So this is why I'm using this particular method. You will have to disclose it very well over there. Okay, so with this, there is another method which is the weighted average method. So what happens in this method is this is not the method of operation. This is just a method for calculation. Uh, if we have a nature of inventory which is very recurring, for example, I am into manufacturing of pens, like I told you. It is a very small good, and every day I am manufacturing, or maybe every hour I am manufacturing, always keeping a track that this was the on the first day I bought it, the ink, for maybe 1 rupee, and on the second day it was 1.5 paise, and then on the third day there was an additional 1.75, then on the third day it came out to be 1 again. So every time keeping a very distinction, too much distinction of these values could be difficult. So given a choice, you can, for calculation purposes, you can average out all these values and follow a weighted average method. But again, the nature of business would be FIFO only or LIFO only. It is just calculation, how you're going to calculate it in your books of accounts. But in practice, what the company might be doing is they might be using FIFO and LIFO, but only for the calculation purposes. Weighted average might be operational. Also, just a quick fact. Suppose there was zero inflation in the world, then all these three methods would be giving you same answer. Why? Because always the price of the good will remain the same, which is not the case in true world. And then any method you opt will give you the same results, right? Now, just a quick analysis of the three methods which we have studied. Um, in case of FIFO method, you will see that always generally the last purchase is the highest price. Why? Because every year inflation is increasing. So you are selling the previous stock first. So whatever remains with you is the latest one and the expensive one usually. Whereas in case of LIFO, whatever is the latest item, you are selling it first, and you are selling it at good price because it is a technology oriented or maybe a trend oriented company or industry. So whatever that remains is usually of a lower price because it is the older inventory, right? In case of weighted average, since you are waiting it out every time, you can see that there is no difference in the calculation. Whereas if it was a vice versa situation, if it was not a inflating economy, you will find again FIFO and DIFO there would be a reversal, but weighted average would remain same. Okay, everybody clear till here? Guys, quickly in the chat box, please. Anybody who has any doubts till here can quickly ask in before we pick up the next topic. So weighted average is simply you are going to average it out. Suppose I purchased on the first day for 100. On the second day, I purchased goods for rupees 150. So I'll do 100 plus 150 divided by 2. And I'll value the entire. So on the first day, I purchased 5 pens. On the second day, I purchased another 5, but for 150 rupees. So in total, I have 10 pens. What I'll do is I'll simply value it out at not individually at 100 and 150, but 100 plus 150 divided by 2. I will do an average of those accounts, and we can apply weights also while calculating this average. So what you will find is usually in the companies you will find FIFO method only, because in India FIFO is the only prescribed method. You are not allowed to use LIFO and not allowed to use any other methods which you can see on the internet. FIFO is usually used. So the next topic is very simple. It is working capital cycle. Anybody who has any idea what is working capital, what is working capital cycle, fair idea about it, no idea, anything?
Capital requirement for day-to-day working activity of a company is basically a working capital requirement cycle.
Right, very right. So, not all the amounts all the cash which you have, you can invest in assets and investments. You need some cash and running always. So, what happens in case of a company is it has to make purchases, it has to make out of those purchases, it has to make an inventory. When the inventory be sold as sales, only then the cash will come back to it. So planning of this entire cycle is very important. And for every company, usually the cycle is very much defined. For maybe a vegetable or a fruit industry, this cycle might be only of 2 days or 5 days, a very shorter cycle. But for some industry like a computer industry or maybe a garment industry, this cycle could be bigger because it takes time to make purchases of the raw material. It takes time to convert it into inventory, and it takes time to again sell it out. So returning of cash might be a period might be of 30 days or 60 days. So for those 30 days, when the company has no cash or all the cash is invented in purchases, it needs to have a fair idea that, okay, how am I going to meet my requirements for 30 days when my cash is blocked? So this is where the importance of the cycle comes out to be. In order to calculate the working capital cycle, I need to have a fair idea of all these four components, and then basis on that, we will determine, okay, this is my working capital requirement if I want to survive for the next period of 30 days in the industry. So very simple calculation. The working capital life cycle is usually this only. we make some purchases, we invest those purchases in form of inventory, then we make sales, and again we receive the cash. So we have to what we simply do for the calculation of this working capital life cycle is we firstly calculate what is the cycle for these three components, and then we can add these two and subtract the payable days, and we'll receive the cash working cycle or the working capital cycle. So how this is done is, in case of purchases, simply what you will do is you will calculate it based on these two figures, the accounts payable and the purchases price. The average of the payables and purchases would come out to be the ratio. In case of inventory also the same system will be applied. The average payables for inventory divided by COGS you will do, and then for receivables the average of receivables divided by sales. Once you have these three ratios available with you, how you will calculate it in number of days is, when you multiply it by 365 days, you will get days for these, and then the receivable days plus the inventory days minus all the payable days, you will be able to obtain the working capital life cycle. So the calculation is very methodological. This is the calculation that is to be followed. Very simple formulas for this. But why we need to calculate the working capital cycle is a bigger concept. I hope that you guys have understood. So these formulas you can find it anywhere and calculate the cycle. But why this cycle is important, I hope that everybody has understood it very well. That why do you need to know the cycle? Why it is relevant for us? Anybody who's not clear on this? Why we need to know about the working capital cycle of any company? So I think everybody is clear on this. Okay. So now the next topic is deferred taxes. So I told you yesterday that a brief about deferred taxes. We are going to do a slighter more detail on this. So just a quick reference from what we did yesterday was, sometimes there are different rates of different ways, or maybe there might be a difference in calculation of taxes according to Income Tax Act and as compared to Companies Act. So sometimes it can be higher, it can be lower, it can vary. So whenever there is a difference, we will have to first evaluate whether it is a timing difference or it is a permanent difference. So some differences can be permanent. We are not accounting for permanent differences over here. Only the differences which are temporary are getting accounted over here. For example, one good example which you will find everywhere is depreciation. Sometimes income tax rules tells you that you can claim the depreciation in the first year of purchasing the asset. So as per income tax calculation, all the depreciation is charged in the first year, but in Companies Act you will have to follow WDV, and on year basis depreciation would be charged. Therefore the calculation of taxes will vary. Right? With me till here? Just quickly in the chat box, please. Okay, so this is the simplest example I've taken in case of depreciation. So also there can be one case wherein the depreciation amount Income Tax Act tells you that okay, you cannot claim for the first 5 years any depreciation. At the end of the 5th year, you can claim all the entire depreciation. Again, that would be a difference, right? So there can be two circumstances. Depreciation as per Companies Act. So I am preparing financial statement for 1 year. So if the Companies Act allows me higher amount of depreciation, but Income Tax Act tells me no, in the first year you cannot have any depreciation. At the end of 5th year, you can have all of it. There would be a difference. This difference is a temporary difference in nature. Why? Because in the end, maybe after 5 years, if you will see in Companies Act also, the sum of all the years depreciation would come out to be the same amount which we are getting in the income tax case. But why this difference is happening in the first year is only because there is a gap of rules and there is a gap of timing. This is allowing you at the end of 5th year, whereas this is telling you that okay, charge it every year for next 5 years. So this difference we term it as a timing difference, which is a temporary difference which is arising. These temporary difference, we are accounting them as deferred taxes. So whenever the depreciation for Companies Act is higher and income tax is lower, we will record a deferred tax liability as the taxable temporary difference. Why? Because here my tax calculation will be obviously will come out to be more, but in Income Tax Act I am paying less, right? Here my tax calculation will come out to be more, and here my tax calculation will come out to be less. So there is an additional tax which I have to pay in the future years. Therefore, we have recorded a deferred tax liability over here. In the second circumstance, when depreciation as per Companies Act is less, but Income Tax Act is telling me, okay, in the first year itself, you claim all of the depreciation, then my tax calculation here would be higher. That is, in the first year only I have paid entire of it. So in the future years, I will not have to pay tax. In the books of accounts, how I will record it is as a deferred tax asset. I hope that this concept is clear to all of you. So this was a case of depreciation, which was a very simple case since we had covered in depreciation. So I picked up this case. The reasons for this timing difference can be various reasons. Depreciation is one reason which is common in all the entities, because all the entities have some sort of plant, property, equipment, and always this case arises. Therefore, I was telling you, in any standalone or in any consolidated balance sheet, you will be able to find any one item, but it will always be one item because it is always a net figure that is shown in financial statements. Okay. So this is again the repeat of what I have explained you only. Another reasons can be, for example, so just to give you some more examples of why this timing difference can happen is, suppose you've got a huge loss. Your company ran into fire, and Income Tax Act tells you that okay, you can claim that loss in the first year only. So your tax would automatically be less, but again, as per Companies Act, they tell you that okay, till you don't receive your insurance claim, you cannot reduce the amount of loss. Once you receive the claim for it, only then you can eliminate it. So this would be a timing difference, because in the end you have insurance for it and you will be definitely getting that amount covered up. Whereas Income Tax Act has allowed it right away. Companies Act is telling you wait for insurance. So this is just a timing difference which has happened, and it is going to become neutral in the coming years. So we might have to record deferred tax asset or liability depending upon circumstances. Okay. So likewise, there can be multiple reasons of this timing difference. Every year, when we are preparing financial statements at the end of the year, we have to sit back and evaluate, okay, why there is a difference between the calculation as per Income Tax Act and as per my simple calculation as per Companies Act. And then we merge out, we classify the differences into two categories. Some differences can be permanent, some differences can be timing difference. For example, permanent also, I'll give you some example. For example, Income Tax Act tells you that I am not going to allow this loss. Suppose you traded in some shares and you lost all your money. So they say that, okay, this loss is on the basis of speculation. You should have not wasted your money on speculation activities. We are not going to allow you, and you will have to pay all the tax on this. But in Companies Act, you can claim that you can reduce that particular loss while doing your calculations. So this is a permanent difference. The Income Tax Act is never going to allow it. And this difference is always going to remain. So there will be no recording of deferred tax asset or liability on this particular difference. So likewise, a typical process, how it happens is, at the end of the year, we calculate the tax according to both the acts. And then we try to find out and classify, okay, these differences are the permanent differences and these are the temporary differences. And basis that, we do a combined calculation of all of them. And since there can be multiple items, there can be a loss, there can be depreciation, there can be something else. So we club it all together and form one complete figure, either a deferred tax asset or a deferred tax liability. So again, all this working you can see in the notes to account. There is a detailed note in which you will find of the previous year deferred tax asset moving on to the current year. And it is a very detailed note. You will find it any financial statement that you will visit. Okay. So now coming down to another topic, somebody was talking about contingent liability yesterday. So contingent liabilities is a very, very small concept. And I think it is very, anybody who knows about it can quickly tell the audience. No, Piyush, what we pay to the income tax authority in any particular year is always the amount that is calculated as per Income Tax Act. Why we are creating DTA, DTL is just to make the presentation correct. If we will present directly what the calculation is as per Income Tax Act in the books of accounts, then that presentation would be wrong, because when anybody would simply multiply the profit figure with the tax rate, it will not be always same. So in order to merge out the difference, whatever tax we have paid to the income tax authority, we classify it into two parts. One part we say as current tax, and one part we say it as DTA or DTL. So the sum of those two figures will always be the income tax which has been paid. So DTA, DTL is not happening in real life. It is just for presentation purposes that we are calculating this out, so that our financial statements present a true view of the situation. Because although Income Tax Act has allowed you to pay, take the claim for depreciation, maybe depreciation in the very first year, you are going to use that asset over the next 5 years. So accordingly, your tax should also be distributed according to next 5 years only in your accounts when you see it. Okay, coming back to contingent liability, anybody who has any idea what is contingent liability, quickly?
Any liability which a company foresee may occur to the company in future due to some event which might happen in future. So we give a note regarding that in the financials, like not in the financials, in the notes to accounts. Like we have a long pending appeal in the income tax departments, and when we foresee that we might lose it and we have to pay the taxes, tax liability arising in that. So in that case, we
Very
can give a
correct. Yes, a very good example. Also, no, Sneha, example of fire in office is not a contingent liability. Um, that is a permanent loss. The fire has already occurred. How can that be contingent? So you will book a loss in that case. So I think people usually get, it's not you, it's like people usually get confused in contingent and any existing loss. So first you need to understand is contingent liability is always a liability. A litigation case is a very good example of this. Suppose you are into litigation and there is a fair chance that you might win the case and there is a chance that you might lose it also. So it is an unpredictable event. But if you lose that particular case, then you might have to incur some liability around that case. So we cannot record this amount as on the current date. Why? Because the event is not certain. Record liabilities only which we are certain in our financial statements, either as current or as non-current liabilities. But just totally missing out, suppose the case is a very voluminous case. The case, if you lose that particular case, the company might be totally going to winding up. So this information is very important for the stakeholders. And not disclosing this information till the results of the case come out would not be very correct and legitimate. Therefore, what we do is we don't recognize any amounts in the balance sheet, but we give a separate note at the end in notes to accounts labeled as contingent liability, wherein we disclose that, okay, this is the case which has been pending and we have a fair chance of, we have this much percentage chance of winning it or losing it. In case we lose it, this would be approximate liability which we might have to face. So that is what is contingent liability. It is based on some future events. And now coming on to the example of fire, suppose a fire has occurred. Then it is not a contingent liability. Why? Because the fire has already happened. The event is certain, it is done. Whatever loss that has been incurred or whatever liability that has been incurred, you will have to record all of that liability in your books of accounts. Suppose you are going to get a recoverable insurance of that fire. You are going to receive something in hand because of that fire. You cannot record it. Why? Because contingent are only liability. Contingent assets are never recorded in financial statement. There is nothing like contingent asset. You will never find that we will record any future probable incomes or we'll disclose them by the way of any note. We never do that. We our liabilities to the extent of liabilities only, which is to be disclosed in financial statement. So I hope that this is clear to all of you. What is contingent liability? Just you can quickly go through this slide. Another example could be warranties. Suppose your company is into giving warranties and although your product is not faulty, but maybe there is a circumstance that 1 out of 5 cases comes back to you, and in that case you might have to expel some money or get the product rectified, then that would also be recorded as a contingent liability. Why? Because it is not certain that every time 1 out of 5 customer would come out to you. But yes, since you have given it as a warranty, there is also a chance that something might go wrong and the customer might come back to you or return the product or something like that. Or you might have to give him any additional product. So you do that calculation, keep it in notes to accounts. But recording it as a certain liability would also be wrong. Therefore, we have followed a conservative approach by giving a note. So, is everybody clear? Contingent liabilities are always uncertain. Whatever is certain, whatever you know has already happened. In case you know that, okay, we've lost the lawsuit on the last day while preparing balance sheet, then you will record that liability as your full-fledged liability in your books to accounts. But till the lawsuit is in appeal and you don't know what the end result could be, but yes, you obviously know that, okay, these are my chances of losing, and if I lose, this would be my penalty, then that much amount we are supposed to disclose in notes. Now coming to the next topic we have is equity, and in equity also we have particularly retained earnings. So what is retained earnings is all the profit that is earned during the current year. Some might be distributed to the shareholders, but some the company retains with itself. Whatever is retained for future uses or purposes is known as retained earnings. So there is another detailed note wherein you can find the components of detailed earnings. There can be multiple components why we can have profits accumulated over years in our financial statements. So how you can navigate this particular item is you have to go to your balance sheet and you will be able to find retained earnings. And once you see in balance sheet, that amount will give you a reference of a note, or there might be a separate statement of changes in equity. So it shows a movement schedule wherein you can see what are the components of retained earnings for any particular company. One component can be some reserves and surplus we've maintained over the years that can be coming in retained earnings. Sometimes we might have valued our land according to the market value, and you will generally see that the market prices of land are usually higher year after year. So you can see a revaluation surplus on account of some asset in the retained earnings. Also, sometimes company issues their shares at premium. So the premium amount comes in retained earnings as securities premium or issue of common stock at premium. So there can be other items also. There can be some forex reserves, there can be some other special reserves companies maintaining. So everything goes into retained earnings. Okay, so till here we finish all the items which are related to balance sheet, and now we are coming down to the revenue, the P&L items. I hope that things are clear till here. All balance sheet items are clear to all of you. Okay. So contingent liability, Piyush, can be current, can be non-current. That is, we don't have to bifurcate it in the financial statements since we are not this. So all the liabilities which are coming in a balance sheet and we are recording them in a books of accounts, those liabilities or those assets we have to classify as current or non-current. But since we are not sure about this liability, so obviously we are not sure when this liability would arise. So as on date, we are not able to define the liability itself. Defining when it would be arise is a very difficult task. So no classification is done as to whether the contingent liability is a current liability or a non-current liability. If we were already able to define the liability in itself, we would have recorded it in the books of accounts only, not disclosed as only in notes. Okay, so P&L items are very, very simple. I think most of you would know most of these items. So would like to have inputs from you as well. The first part being revenue. Anybody would like to tell what is revenue? Anybody? I see a lot of people have not spoken at all. If somebody would like to comment on it.
Income generated out of the operations.
Okay. Income generated from operations, you are saying revenue. Anybody else?
In from day-to-day operations of the company or sale of the company or normal working.
Okay. So what is the difference between manufacturing industry and what is the difference between revenue and sale of goods then, or sale of goods and services? Is there any difference, or you feel that there is no difference?
No
It
difference,
is
ma'am.
alternative term. Okay, no difference. Anybody else? So I can say that revenue and sale of goods and services is one and the same thing, right? Everybody agrees on this?
So this includes any other income generated in other than the normal operation of business.
Right. Very correct. Who was this?
Yeah, hi, this is Swapnil.
Okay. I very rightly said. Swapnil, there is a slight difference between sale of goods and services and revenue. So revenue is a broader term and sale of goods and services is a subset. Whatever you are earning from selling the inventory or the services which the company deals in is known as sale of goods or services. It is the operating income or the operating revenue that has been generated from the particular sale. But like we did in the class today, there can be additional incomes. There can be sale of scrap. There can be sale of investment. You can have some proceeds from that sale. You might want to sell some other asset. Maybe it is not of use to you. There can be some other incomes, like I've made some investment and I receive interest on that particular investment. I received dividend from some in particular investment. So there can be other miscellaneous incomes also. All that also goes into revenue. So there are two subdivisions of revenue. One is the operating revenue and one is the non-operating revenue. And always you will find this in any financial accounts. So revenue and sale of goods and services, although alternatively used, is not very correct. There is a slight differentiation, and this is that differentiation. So there is operating revenue, there is non-operating. Everything that you're earning from the sale of whole product is your operating revenue, and all the other incomes are your non-operating revenues. And usually in financial statements, you will find operating revenues are labeled as sale of goods and services, and non-operating revenues are labeled as other incomes. Okay, so the next item is expenses. Anybody who would like to tell me, so everybody knows what are expenses, everything that has been incurred to earn that particular revenue in day-to-day nature are expenses. But anybody can give me examples of expenses, any expenses which you have seen, which you know about?
Advertisement expense.
Advertisement expense. Okay, that can be one expense which the company is incurring. Cost of goods sold is one expense, that is the core
Transportation.
expense of any company.
Rent,
Transportation expense, rent can be there.
Miscellaneous expense.
There can be miscellaneous expenses also.
salaries,
Energy.
Yes. So salary is a very good example. Salary usually does not come as salary in the books of accounts. What you will see in the financial statement is that it comes under the employee benefit expenses. And when you go to the notes to employee benefit expenses, you will see not only has the salary component, but it will have additionally the amount of contribution in the provident fund, in any other fund which is done on behalf of the company for the employee. So you should definitely go and visit that particular note. Okay, I missed on to somebody. Somebody told me some other expense also.
Electricity expenses.
Electricity expenses. So broadly, and then the most important which we've covered today is the depreciation expense, right? Depreciation, amortization expenses, and then the tax expenses. So broadly, if you will see, you will always find cost of goods sold if it is a production industry, or even if it is a service industry, you will find some sort of costs which are being incurred for delivering the services. That would all come under cost of goods sold. These are basically the direct costs which are incurred by the company, the most important ones. Then you will find some additional general administrative nature expenses, everything that was like advertisement, transportation, usually goes into this or this. So advertisement and transportation can come under selling, distribution, marketing costs as well. These are not the direct costs, these are all indirect costs. Then you will have depreciation and amortization, because you are charging every year depreciation and amortization on a fixed and intangible assets. Additionally, you can have some interest expenses or some bank charges. So finance cost is the head wherein these charges are clubbed out. Then you will always find income tax expenses. So now that you know that there is revenue and expenses, calculating profit is very, very easy. You simply have to subtract expenses from the revenue and then you will come out on the net profit. It can be net profit, it can be net loss also. Depending upon the circumstances of the company, the situation can vary. Another slight bifurcation in case of expenditure is, expenditure can be of two types. It can be capital expenditure, it can be current expenditure. So capital expenditure is usually purchases of like fixed assets or any long-term assets which you are doing. So we don't show it in the P&L, we show it as expenditure, this expenditure in the balance sheet in the form of fixed asset. But yes, again, we are charging it off in current expenditure as depreciation. Okay, so I hope there is no problem in this one. Then all these items we have already covered, the depreciation, deferred taxes and everything. One slight thing which is left is now the presentation in the financial statements. So how this happens is, I'll just, so you can have various levels. So depending upon the industry, you will not find EBITDA in earning, which is earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization, as a matter of presentation, being shown in the in Indian companies. You can find this presentation abroad in maybe UK GAAP or US GAAP. Usually in the UK GAAP you will see this presentation, but usually this is the presentation that comes out in the financial statement, which is simply revenue and expenses and the net profit figure, or the profit before tax figure, which comes out to be. So in any example, you can see in the profit and loss account. So this is like presentation purposes. Sometimes the company can opt that they want to present this figure also, and then they might subtract separately interest, depreciation, and amortization. And also they can choose, okay, we want to first present this, then subtract depreciation and amortization, present this figure also, and then out of this figure we want to subtract the interest and taxes and then come out on the net profit. So this presentation can vary, but the crux is the same. All the expenses, in order to reach the net profit figure, you will have to subtract all the expenses. You will have to add all the revenues. But yes, for presentation purposes, you can show the gross profit also, you can show EBITDA also, you can show EBIT also. Your presentation can vary based on your business requirement. So, okay, I hope that no, COGS is not a capex expense. Why? Because it is the cost of goods sold. Suppose you are incurring some directly labor expenses, some other expenses you are incurring in manufacturing and sale of your inventory, then that will go in COGS. Capex expense. All the inventory is for current period only. Like I told you, it is always current asset. All this expense you are incurring. Why? Because you want to create an inventory and sell it. So all this is directly related to your business and it is not something that you are going to derive future benefit out of. This is why COGS is always a direct expense and you will always see it in P&L. Anybody, any other doubts? We have like 5 minutes. Okay, so goodwill is very, very simple. Any company which you are purchasing, whatever the fair market value of the assets and liabilities in that company is coming out to be the net worth, you will calculate it the net worth according to the fair market value, and then you will calculate it according to your books of accounts. Whatever the differential is, that is going to be the goodwill of purchasing that particular company. And supposedly, I was investing in another company, and I am purchasing some amount of assets, some amount of liabilities of that company. But I've pre-decided, okay, I am going to pay you 1,000 crores only. So 1,000 crores is my consideration which I am paying. But whatever would be the fair market value of the assets and liabilities differential is actually the value of that particular company. So 1,000 minus the net worth, suppose the net worth comes out to be 800 rupees, then 200 would be my goodwill, which I have extra paid to that particular company in order to purchase it. Yes, Richa is very rightly written in the chat box. Anybody else, any other doubts? Anything you would like to talk about? Any concept, maybe your favorite concept from the session, or anything that was new to any one of you? We have a quick 5 minutes. Okay, so all of you tell me one new concept or one concept that you found the best out of all the concepts which you've learned. Quickly. Minority interest. Richa says minority interest is actually a very good concept. Deferred tax asset, very complicated concept, but good again. Basically, as a matter of fact, you guys understood deferred tax a lot faster as compared to my previous batches, which is a good thumbs up to all of you. Anybody else? No concept, some concept you found interesting? So deferred tax asset seems to be the most interesting concept. Okay, inventory was also nice. Okay. Investment in associates, great. Anirudh says contingent liabilities. It is a tricky one. I hope that all of you understood all of the concepts and there was no difficulty in the understanding part. What I would request all of you to do is definitely any financial statements of your choice. There are so many companies available in your in Google, and you can go through any of them and try to identify, try to get a hands-on experience, try to become easy with usage of financial statements. Investment in associate is just as same as investment in subsidiary. The only difference is that in a subsidiary you might have a lot of control. I think somebody is on unmute. Okay, so in case of investment in associate, you might invest 20% in that company, or there are defined rules as to when you have to classify it as investment in subsidiary, associate, or JV, which is joint venture. So investment in layman's language, I would say, is when you have slight investment in a particular company, but yes, you have some decision making powers. Usually this investment in associate is usually an investment which is less than 50%, but yes, more than 20% or so. The rules keep on changing and are revised from time to time. So you will have to see the updated list. But it is just as same, only the stake is less and the control is comparatively less as compared to subsidiary. So okay, it's 12 my clock, and I think that there are no other doubts. So can we go ahead and wind this up?
Hi, just one doubt.
Okay.
Can associate company be termed as a group company, like having a common promoter or a group company sort of?
Yes, definitely. So suppose you have an investment of 20% or maybe 30%, and you have additionally some control over the company. You can decide its business, or you can make a say in its business. So it comes under the definition of control, and everything that comes under the definition of control, we have to consolidate it in the financial statements of parent. So again, that would get consolidated, but only up till the extent of 20%. So you will have to create a non-controlling interest, that is interest for the other parties, for the remaining 80%. So basically the accounting varies slightly, but yes, it will be consolidated in the financial statements.
Okay, thank you.
Also, just an add-on, supposedly for the immediate company, it is an associate, but your parent company has also invested in that particular company. It is a two-way hierarchy. So there is one, and on the top of one, there is two, and on the top of two, there is three, but three has invested in two also and in one also. So for three, it might not be an associate, it might be a subsidiary, like one. So everything would get consolidated in three also. Can a public company buy its own shares from market with the intention of investment and the goal of capital appreciation, or it only buys its own share as buyback? So usually whenever, so there are rules depending upon there are listing rules. So you can read through the SEBI guidelines. There are SEBI listing rules in India which are applicable. I think these rules vary according to where the listing is being done. If it is an IPO, you cannot invest. Again, if in your own shares, because again, then that is what is the purpose of going public, right? But yes, shareholders can maintain some stake. So there are QIBs, there are again regulations around it. So consolidation mandatory rule. Whenever there is a parent subsidiary relationship, it will always be consolidated. Whenever there is an associate JV relationship, we have separate guidance around it, when it gets consolidated and when it does not get consolidated. But yes, as a general rule, I would say consolidation always happens. There is no exception to consolidation in the Companies Act. wherever you will see there is a hierarchy, there will be always consolidated financial statements. There will be always standalone also for each individual entity, but consolidation will always be there. Yes, you can choose between the levels of consolidation. Suppose, so relaxation is given by the government in such a way, like I was talking about 1, 2, and 3. So sometimes what happens is if 3 is consolidating the entire group, you can get a relaxation at level 2, that okay, 2 does not need to prepare a separately consolidated financial statement including only 1, because there is a group level financial statement that is happening. But this kind of relaxation, I don't think it is in India. In India, you have to consolidate everything. So, okay, friends, I think that you had a good time learning, and do visit some of the annual reports and try to revise your topics. It would be immensely helpful in the coming sessions. Thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.